Hello everybody, I'm Iain Abernethy, and in this video I want to talk about the 4 stages of Kata. This is a model that I came up with, but it's drawn on what the old masters said about Kata and the link between Kata and its applications and the way in which we should be training, Kata to get it to work. So this 4 principles is mine, but it pretty much, is reflected in the writing of the old masters as well. So these 4 stages are: we learn the solo form, we learn the applications to the kata, we identify the underlying principles so we can adapt and vary, and then we gain live experience of doing it. If we're doing all 4 of those, kata works and works well. It's when we miss ones out that we're going to have problems. So most karateka do the solo form, okay? And the purpose of that solo form is to encapsulate information from prior generations. So if you just do the solo form and no more, it's like having a book and never reading it. You can have a book on you. I can have Stephen Hawking's book on my shelf, which I have, and like most people, I've never read it. The Brief History of Time book. But if I've got that book there, that doesn't make me an expert in physics. It doesn't give me any understanding unless I take the book off the shelf and actually read it. Something I'll have to get round to. So that's the first stage. We've got the solo form, okay, but we need to study it. That's when we go to the bunkai. So we study the applications of the form, our instructors tell us what these applications are, or maybe, you're not that lucky and you have to research them yourself. But we look at what the applications of the kata will be. But again, that's still not enough, because if you stop there, then all you have is a bag of tricks. The next stage from there is you identify the underlying principles so you can adapt and vary. So we look at a movement and we say, what is this movement trying to tell us? Because I think a common mistake in kata is people view it as a bag of tricks, a set of techniques. It's not that. It's a set of techniques to illustrate core principles. If you were to try and record a fighting system, with all its variations and all the different ways in which techniques can be combined, your kata would be infinitely long. It would be totally unwieldy. So what you do is you go, okay, let's take techniques and drills that show the essence of the method, and let's put them in the solo form. So the analogy I often use, and use it in my bunkai jitsu book, it's like an acorn and an oak. If you want an oak tree, that's a big, unwieldy thing, lots of branches, huge. But if you want one, you just need an acorn. So an oak tree produces acorns in the same way a fighting system produces kata. What you then do is you take the acorn away and you plant it. Unfortunately, what most people do is they collect acorns. How many acorns have you got? Well, I've got 6. I've got 10. I must be a better karateka than you. People collect kata. The whole point is you're supposed to take those acorns and plant them, nurture them, and then it grows. And that's what we're doing when we look at the underlying principles. We're expanding on the essence of the kata. And what pop culture references, but everyone knows that scene from Enter the Dragon, okay, the famous Bruce Lee movie, where Bruce Lee's teaching the young guy at the start of the movie, and at one point he says, it's like a finger pointing to the moon. And the kid looks at the finger and Bruce Lee slaps him and said, if you only concentrate on the finger, you will miss all that heavenly glory. So that's the idea. Don't get stuck on the example. Don't get stuck on the thing that's pointing you in the right direction. If the kata shows you a strangle, it's not saying this is the only strangle. It's saying these are all strangles. You know what I mean? The essences of the same. If it shows you a throw, then you should look at the principles of rotation and balance breaking and explore the other ways in which they can be employed. So another analogy is maths books. You go to school and you look at a maths book. It doesn't say, okay, here's every single possible mathematical problem you can ever imagine. It goes, okay, here's an example. There's quadratic equations. Here's what a quadratic equation is. Here's what it does, and here's a couple we've done for you. And from those examples, you can work the rest out for yourself. Here's some we want you to now work out. So that's what we're doing by the principle side of things. And then finally what we do is we gain live experience of doing it, because up until then it's all academic. So this is what I call the kata-based sparring, to differentiate it from rule-based sparring or competition sparring. It means that we're fighting in accordance with the methods and objectives of the kata, drills that are relevant to real-world self-defense, using the methods and principles of kata. And it's often said, you can't drill these things safely, or you can't do kata live. You can. There's throws in kata. You can do throws live. Judo guys do them all the time. You can do the trapping stuff. You can do all that. You can punch and kick. You can do all that too. You can lock so long as you take control. You can choke and strangle so long as people tap out. You can substitute things. You can't stick a thumb in an eye, but you can touch the forehead. If I could get my thumb here, I could get my thumb here. So we use this kind of substitution and omission and normal safety procedures, and there's not a lot from kata that we can't drill live. You know, there's some things we can't do full power neck cranks, but a lot of it we can, and then we gain actual live experience of doing it. And the idea is these 4 stages, it's not like you get to 4 and you never go back. You're doing all of them all the time. You're doing the solar form, you're studying the bunkai, you're learning about the principles, and you're gaining life experience of doing it. People have this idea that kata is like a mock fight, and it's not. It's not intended to be a mock fight. Funakoshi said that kata was like textbooks to a student, we've already used that analogy, or tactical exercises to a soldier. So when a soldier does tactical exercises, no one's saying to them, this is the way it will actually happen in reality. What they're saying is, here's a drill that replicates the conditions you will face. And these are the kind of things we want to do, want you to do, that are more likely to lead to your success. And so it's the same thing. Kata is supposed to provide these tactical exercises. So one thing as well, when it comes to the principles, people often misunderstand that, and I think maybe a better word would be habits. So if you're confused by the word principles, think of habits. So through my bunkai training, let's take a simple example, right? One of the things that Kata bunkai teaches me to do is to make sure I tactically position myself. So when we see the angles in kata, that's telling you the angle that you should be in relation to the enemy. It's not, as is commonly thought, the angle the enemy attacks you from. That was written off as nonsense by Ken Wamabuni in the 1930s. That's not what the angles are about. So, but the general idea is, when we are taking those angles, is I want to keep the enemy in front of me, my attack line, where my techniques are most efficient. But I don't want to be in front of the enemy, because that's where he's most efficient. So if I can get to the side of him, or I can get to a slight angle, that gives me an advantage. So when I'm doing my kata, every time I go to one of those angles, that will remind me of that fact. When I do my bunkai drills, I'm rehearsing it. When I do my exploring the principles or level 3 stuff, I'm looking at other ways I can manipulate and use those angles, either by moving the enemy to that angle, or moving myself to that angle, or a combination of them both, this tactical position. And then in live practice, what should happen is, if I've done it right, is I now have a habit. One of the things I do a lot is I practice moving to an angle on the enemy. So when I'm fighting and doing my live drills, or if, the next stage on, if I'm actually defending myself, I'll do this through habit. I will intuitively take that angle. So this is the idea, kata's not supposed to be like a fixed replica fight. It's supposed to get us to the position where it can be freely employed by following this 4-stage model. Learn the kata, learn the applications, identify the underlying principles so you can adapt and vary, and gain live experience of doing it. Because kata isn't a substitute for sparring. Funakoshi again. Funakoshi said this, Gichin Funakoshi. Kata sparring does not exist apart from the kata, but for the practice of the kata. Motabu said that kumite. He said kumite is an actual fight where we use the techniques of the kata to grapple with the opponent. Choji Miyagi, the founder of Goju, he said that through sparring we can identify the practical applications of kata. So what we've got there is, and there's others, but many more quotes like that besides, this strong link between live practice and kata. It's generally been lost. Kata is now thought of as being a fixed set, replica, very bizarre fight. And then we spar in a way that has no resemblance to kata or self-defense anymore. We expand the distance and we practice fighting each other, which is fine. It's good to do that, but it's not what your kata's all about. So lots of other things we could talk about there, lots of specific principles we could talk about. Kata-based sparring, that's a huge topic in and of itself. But I'd like you to think about these 4 principles. Learn the kata, or 4 stages. Learn the kata, learn the applications, identify the underlying principles so you can adapt and vary, embed the habits, and then gain live experience of freely employing those habits. When you can do that, that's when kata will really work for you.